Marcus Hendricks stood in the back of the crowded auction hall, clutching a crumpled cashier's check for $47,000. Every cent he had left in the world. Around him, men in expensive suits chuckled and whispered as the auctioneer's voice echoed off the concrete walls. Lot 47, the old Riverside Regional Airport, complete with runway, terminal, and all infrastructure thereon. Do I hear $5,000? The laughter grew louder. Someone behind Marcus muttered about throwing good money after bad. A woman in pearls shook her head, calling it a monument to government waste. The facility had been abandoned for 3 years, weeds growing through cracks in the tarmac, windows boarded up like dead eyes. Marcus stepped forward. $50,000. The room fell silent. Heads turned. The auctioneer blinked twice before recovering his composure. Going once, going twice. His gavel cracked like thunder. Sold to bidder 23. As Marcus walked toward the registration desk, he heard the whispers following him like shadows. Fool. Desperate. Throwing his life away on a worthless pile of concrete and dreams. 6 months ago, Marcus had been a senior aviation systems engineer at Apex Aeronautics, designing fuel management systems for commercial aircraft. 15 years of expertise, countless certifications, patents with his name on them. Then the defense contracts dried up, and the layoffs began. He drove home from the auction in his battered pickup truck, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The foreclosure notice waited on his kitchen table like an unwelcome guest. 30 days to pay or lose the house his daughter Lily called home. Daddy, did you buy something today? 80-year-old Lily bounced into the kitchen, backpack sliding off her shoulder. Her school uniform was wrinkled, her smile bright despite everything falling apart around them. I did, sweetheart. Something big. His sister Carmen had called 3 times since the auction, each voicemail more frantic than the last. His brother-in-law's voice carried through the phone when Marcus finally answered, dripping with condescension. Marcus, what the hell were you thinking? Throwing away your last dime on some abandoned airport? You got a kid to think about. This isn't some fantasy where you become the next Howard Hughes. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the foreclosure papers, then at Lily drawing pictures at the table. In her crayon world, airplanes still soared through endless blue skies. The next morning brought a parade of concerned neighbors and unwanted advice. Mrs. Patterson from next door knocked before 7, coffee cup in hand, and worry etched across her weathered face. Marcus, honey, I heard about yesterday. Everyone's talking. You know I care about you and Lily, but buying that old airport? She shook her head slowly. That place has been a money pit for the government for years. What makes you think you can make it work? By noon, his former supervisor Dave Kowalski had called twice. Marcus, buddy, I heard through the grapevine. Look, I know times are tough, but this isn't the answer. You're a brilliant engineer, but airports aren't just about engineering. They're about politics, regulations, millions in operating costs. His phone buzzed constantly. Text messages from college friends who'd heard the news. Social media posts he didn't want to see but couldn't stop reading. The local newspaper had picked up the story, calling it a desperate gamble by a laid-off worker. That evening, Carmen arrived uninvited with a folder full of bankruptcy paperwork and the number of a financial counselor. She sat at his kitchen table like a concerned intervention specialist. Marcus, you need help. Professional help. This airport fantasy is going to destroy what's left of your life. Think about Lily's future, not some pipe dream about aviation glory. Marcus drove through the rusted gates of Riverside Regional Airport at dawn, keys heavy in his pocket. The terminal building loomed ahead, its windows boarded like closed eyes, weeds pushing through sidewalk cracks. Anyone else would have seen decay and abandonment. But Marcus saw infrastructure. He walked the perimeter first, measuring with practice steps. The runway stretched 6,000 feet, longer than he'd expected from the auction photos. His trained eye caught details others had missed. The asphalt showed minimal cracking. The lighting systems were intact, just disconnected. The drainage appeared properly engineered. Inside the terminal, his footsteps echoed through empty corridors. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight. The departure boards were dark, but the electrical conduits ran true and straight. The baggage handling system sat silent, but complete. In what had been the maintenance hangar, Marcus found his first real surprise. Aviation fuel pumps, still sealed and certified. Hydraulic lifts designed for commercial aircraft. Tool cribs full of specialized equipment that most people wouldn't recognize, but any aircraft mechanic would kill for. He pulled out his phone and began taking notes. Fuel system capacity, electrical load calculations, runway weight ratings. Numbers that meant nothing to real estate speculators, but everything to someone who understood aviation operations. The afternoon sun slanted low when he finally locked the gates behind him. Marcus returned the next morning with his old engineering tablet and a fresh sense of purpose. In the control tower, he discovered equipment that made his pulse quicken. Navigation systems sat dormant but intact. Radio towers still reached toward the sky, their foundations solid and properly grounded. The fuel farm revealed the biggest surprise yet. Underground storage tanks, each holding thousands of gallons, with monitoring systems that met current EPA standards. The automated fuel management system bore certification stickers dated just 2 years ago. Someone had maintained this facility far longer than the public records indicated. In the administrative offices, he found filing cabinets full of documents the government liquidators had apparently overlooked. Maintenance logs, inspection reports, certification renewals. His engineering background let him decipher what others would see as bureaucratic gibberish. One folder made him stop breathing. Federal Aviation Administration operating certificates, current through next year. Instrument landing system approvals. Part 139 airport operating certificates that cost hundreds of thousands to obtain. Marcus sat in the empty airport manager's office. Papers spread across the dust-covered desk. The auction had advertised this as surplus real estate, concrete and land. But these documents suggested something entirely different. This wasn't just property. This was a functioning airport, temporarily closed but still legally operational. His phone rang. Carmen again. He let it go to voicemail, too stunned by his discovery to face another lecture about financial responsibility. The foreclosure notice arrived with a bright red stamp. Final notice. 14 days remaining. Marcus stared at the paper while Lily ate cereal at the kitchen table, humming a song she'd learned at school. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" Her spoon clinked against the bowl, innocent eyes searching his face. "Just thinking about work stuff, sweetheart." He forced a smile, folding the notice before she could see it. His job search had yielded nothing but polite rejections. The aviation industry remained sluggish, and his months of unemployment made him less attractive to potential employers. Carmen's latest voicemail was brutal in its honesty. "Marcus, the bank called me as your emergency contact. They're moving forward with foreclosure. You have 2 weeks to come up with $60,000, or you and Lily lose everything. This airport nonsense has to stop. Sell it, take whatever loss you can get, and salvage what's left of your life." That afternoon, standing in the empty terminal with those mysterious certificates in his hands, doubt crept in like fog. What if everyone was right? What if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life? The documents could be worthless, expired bureaucratic relics that meant nothing in the real world. But his engineering mind kept returning to the maintenance logs, the current certification dates, the fuel systems that were far too sophisticated for a truly abandoned facility. Something didn't add up. Marcus spent the entire night in the airport's administrative wing, reading by flashlight. His engineering training had taught him to analyze complex technical documents, and these aviation contracts were yielding their secrets one paragraph at a time. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning. Buried in a federal transportation file was a contract amendment dated 8 months ago. The airport hadn't been abandoned due to financial failure. It had been temporarily closed due to an administrative dispute between the previous operator and the Federal Aviation Administration over maintenance contractor certifications. But the federal contracts remained active. Emergency landing rights for military aircraft, fuel depot agreements with the Department of Defense, weather monitoring station partnerships with the National Weather Service. Combined value of the annual contracts exceeded $200 million. Marcus sat back in the dusty chair, his heart pounding. The auction had sold him more than property. He'd unknowingly purchased active federal aviation contracts that the government liquidators had failed to identify. The previous operator's legal troubles had automatically transferred these agreements to whoever owned the facility. His phone showed 17 missed calls from Carmen. The foreclosure deadline loomed like a thundercloud, but these documents changed everything. If he was reading this correctly, he wasn't just a desperate man who'd bought abandoned concrete. He was now the contracting party on some of the most valuable aviation service agreements in the region. Marcus drove to the public library, arms full of photocopied contracts and his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He needed internet access and legal databases his home connection couldn't reach. The reference librarian, Mrs. Chun, helped him access federal contracting records that confirmed his midnight discovery. The trail of bureaucratic mistakes was staggering. The previous airport operator, Riverside Aviation Services, had lost their maintenance contractor license over a paperwork dispute. Rather than resolving the issue, they'd simply walked away, assuming the federal contracts would be canceled. But federal aviation law was precise about contract transfers during ownership changes. Marcus cross-referenced the contract numbers with active FAA databases, emergency landing agreements with the Air National Guard, fuel supply contracts with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, weather monitoring partnerships that provided critical data for regional flight planning, all automatically transferred to the new facility owner upon property purchase. His engineering background proved invaluable in deciphering the technical specifications. Runway load ratings that supported military cargo aircraft, fuel system capacities that met Defense Department requirements, navigation equipment specifications that remained current and certified. The most valuable discovery was the emergency services contract. The military paid premium rates for guaranteed emergency landing availability, especially for facilities with the specialized fuel handling systems that Riverside Regional possessed. Marcus calculated the annual value at over $30 million for this contract alone. By afternoon, he had documented proof that his $50,000 airport purchase had acquired federal contracts worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Marcus placed a call to the Federal Aviation Administration at 8 in the morning, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. The regional office transferred him through 3 departments before connecting him with Patricia Valdez, the contract's compliance supervisor. Mr. Hendricks, I have to say this is highly unusual. We've been wondering what happened to the Riverside contracts after the ownership transfer. The previous operator just disappeared, left us hanging on several critical agreements. Marcus explained his situation, his engineering background lending credibility to his technical questions. Valdez seemed impressed by his knowledge of fuel system regulations and runway certification requirements. The contracts are indeed valid and automatically transferred with the property deed, but reactivating them requires a facility inspection to ensure operational readiness. Given your aviation engineering credentials, you might actually be qualified to serve as the facility operator. She scheduled an inspection for the following week. Marcus hung up, his heart racing. This was real. The contracts existed, the government needed the services, and his engineering background made him legally qualified to operate the facility. That evening, he sat Lily down at the kitchen table. The foreclosure notice lay between them like a bridge he was finally ready to cross. "Sweetheart, remember how I bought that airplane place? Well, it turns out that airplane place might just save our house." Her eyes widened with the kind of wonder only 80-year-olds possessed. "Are we going to fly planes, Daddy?" Patricia Valdez arrived at Riverside Regional with 2 additional inspectors and a tablet full of technical checklists. Marcus met them at the gate, dressed in his cleanest work clothes and carrying a folder of documentation he'd prepared. The inspection began at the fuel farm, where Marcus demonstrated his understanding of hazardous materials handling and EPA compliance requirements. He explained the automated monitoring systems, the secondary containment protocols, and the fuel quality testing procedures with the precision of someone who had designed similar systems. "Impressive knowledge base, Mr. Hendricks." Valdez made notes on her tablet. Most civilian operators need extensive training to understand these specifications. In the control tower, Marcus showed them the navigation equipment, explaining how the instrument landing systems integrated with regional air traffic control. He walked them through weather monitoring protocols, emergency communication procedures, and runway lighting specifications. The hangar inspection revealed his deepest expertise. Marcus identified every piece of specialized equipment, explained maintenance schedules for hydraulic systems, and demonstrated his understanding of aircraft weight and balance calculations. By afternoon, Valdez was asking fewer basic questions and more about his operational plans. She seemed genuinely surprised by his comprehensive grasp of aviation facility management. "Mr. Hendricks, your engineering background shows. Most people who buy surplus government property have no idea what they've actually purchased. You clearly understand both the technical and regulatory requirements for operating a facility of this complexity." Patricia Valdez closed her inspection tablet and faced Marcus in the empty terminal. Her expression had shifted from professional skepticism to genuine respect over the course of the day. "Mr. Hendricks, I'm going to be direct with you. The federal government has been scrambling to find a replacement operator for these contracts since Riverside Aviation walked away. Your facility passes all technical requirements, and your qualifications exceed what we typically see from private operators." She pulled out a thick folder of documents. "These are your active federal aviation service agreements. Emergency landing rights valued at $32 million annually. Fuel depot services worth $48 million. Weather monitoring and communications support worth $67 million. Strategic Petroleum Reserve Backup Facility worth $53 million. Marcus felt the world shift beneath his feet. The numbers were staggering, beyond anything he'd calculated during his midnight research sessions. The total annual contract value is $200 million. You purchased these agreements unknowingly for $50,000 at that government auction. It may be the most successful investment in aviation history. That evening, Marcus called Carmen. Her phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice heavy with resigned concern. "Marcus, please tell me you're not calling with more bad news about that airport." "Carmen, I need you to sit down. Remember how you said I threw away $50,000 on worthless concrete? Well, I just found out that concrete comes with $200 million worth of government contracts." 6 months later, Marcus stood in his renovated airport office, watching military transport aircraft taxi across the runway he now owned and operated. The foreclosure notice had been replaced by federal contract payments that arrived monthly like clockwork. Lily pressed her face against the window, watching a cargo plane prepare for takeoff. "Daddy, you really did save our house with the airplane place." The same neighbors who had called him foolish now stopped by regularly, asking for investment advice. Carmen had apologized 3 times and brought homemade cookies twice. Dave Kowalski from his old job had called asking if Marcus needed any experienced aviation engineers on his rapidly expanding staff. Mrs. Patterson knocked on his front door that evening, coffee cup in hand, but wearing a completely different expression than before. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. I thought you'd lost your mind buying that old airport. Turns out you're the smartest man in this neighborhood." The local newspaper ran a follow-up story calling him the luckiest investor in aviation history. But Marcus knew better. Luck was what people called expertise they didn't understand. His 15 years of aviation engineering experience had let him see value where others saw only abandoned concrete and weeds. Standing on his property that evening, watching the sunset paint his runways gold, Marcus smiled at how hidden talents could change everything when given the chance to shine. If you've ever discovered someone's incredible hidden abilities when they finally got their moment, we'd love to hear your story in the comments below.